Dr. Nathan Burrow back again with another video. So today we're going to go ahead and jump into the topic of the healing process, okay? So started doing another one and realized I should probably at least discuss this a little bit first just to make it a little simpler to understand the next topic. Also, with that said, this is a very important one to know for later because a lot of the treatment plans and things like that I'm going to be doing with those videos to come for different stuff, a lot of it's going to tie into this. Like, this is a very, very important part of what we do for a living because the way we approach treatment, especially in my field, because we are functional doctors, is basically controlling the function and trying to get that healing process managed the way we want to so that we can get it functioning again and then basically get it to heal back into that function state. So we're trying to control the soft tissue healing process as we go through a lot of this stuff. So this is a very important topic, especially with what I do for a living. So anyway, with that said, I'm gonna try to break it down to where it's a lot simpler and not nearly as sciencey, because there's no point. We're not trying to put out that sort of a video. So anyway, I'm gonna try to make it simple, not a ton of physiology or anything like that. Just yeah. Anyway, with that said, everything in the body heals similar to this, but this will be from a soft tissue aspect. So if you want to learn about the other ones, just look up, I don't know, whatever kind of conditions you're looking for in the healing process of it. So anyway, with that said, let's go and jump into it. So healing process is a very, very long period of time, right? We're talking like 1.5 to 2 years, if not even longer type thing, right? Where basically you have a trauma, you're recovering from it for quite a while, okay? So with that said, you can break it down into a couple different phases though. And just like you would kind of imagine, some of them at the start are a little bit quicker and then they get a little longer, and then these are like really, really long because they're very long periods of time healing. So the very back end is what we call the regeneration remodel stage. Okay, we'll jump into that a little bit more in a second, but for a nutshell, basically you're just laying tissue in that spot and getting stronger. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this first part. This is going to be more of the acute phase. Okay, so the acute phase is defined as basically where a lot of the swelling and things like that are happening. This is where a lot of the treatment's going to be going at, and the reason why is because this is where most of the not only symptomatology's at, but a lot of the healing and things like that, and where the big like milestone go ups are, you know what I mean? So it's a lot easier to kind of like gauge on, but also it's a lot easier to try to things like the specific trauma that you were going to. So anyway, with that said, so this acute phase, it's like 60 to 90 days, somewhere in there. So you're talking 2 to 3 months, right? And in that time, basically what the body is doing is this very first part, they call that the proliferation or the inflammatory state, where basically you're going to flood the area with some inflammation, and in that time it's going to kind of open up the tissue to where it's breaking it down a little bit because you have certain cells that are kind of like eating up the old stuff. And what they're going to do is it's going to start laying the groundwork or the ability to start laying new collagen growth or new soft tissue growth, okay? So with that said, the reason you want that swelling in there also is not only so it can kind of break out the old and lay down new. There's a very distinct difference in collagen formation that's going to be laid with a high or good inflammatory state compared to a low inflammatory state, okay? So in a nutshell, basically the one that's going to be in a high inflammatory state is going to be nice and firm, nice and strong, kind of like a concrete, or at least a strong like super Gorilla Glue type thing. It's going to be more firm, more plausible. It's a lot stronger, okay? That's the easiest way to say it. While the one that's going to be low inflammatory state, it's going to be more of a like brittle type scotch tape, where it's holding together, but literally it's on a thread. It's very brittle. It's going to end up being flimsy, and it's going to be easy to break. Again, it's not the strongest, okay? So it's one of those that you don't really want that. It breeds more issues because it's just continually laying down. And that leads into another topic later that we'll have, but yeah, so anyway, with that said, you need that swelling in order to really get kicked off in the inflammatory state in order to kick off the healing process, right? And the thing is, you don't want to have too much swelling, because you do that, it gets sore. It's like throwing kerosene on a fire. So there's ways that you can kind of control that swelling. You don't want to get too much, but that's stuff we'll talk about as we're doing treatment plans and things like that, okay? So as that swelling's happening, you're laying new tissue, right? The more tissue gets laid, the stronger the stuff gets, and then it gets to the point where the tissue's starting to get pretty strong. Muscles coming back, soft tissue's getting laid, and then you hit a point where it's not as much swelling, and it's because now the tissue's laid, and now you're just getting stronger and stronger and stronger in the tissue that has been laid, right? And the more you can keep stress off that area, the stronger that tissue gets, the more firm it gets. And then you hit the end of that acute phase where you've got 60, 90 days of tissue lay, and now you're going into a more like 1.5 year period where it's just continually firming up. You've hit more of the milestones as far as the symptomatology knockoffs go, and now you're hitting a spot where it's going to be very minute, more maintenance type wellness care, okay? So let's back up and make this a little bit simpler as far as verbiage go, okay? So I have a couple of metaphors I really like using for the acute and also the regeneration remodel stage. So we'll just go ahead and jump into those real quick, okay? So with the acute phase, that's really where 99% of my treatment plans usually lie, where we're talking about, hey, I just messed myself up, what do I need to do type thing, okay? And the way it usually goes is that first 10 to 14 days is where we're doing a lot of the treating, and then after that we can kind of back off at least a touch and just make sure we maintain it. But the analogy I like giving is a lot like laying fresh concrete, okay? Where whenever you're laying fresh concrete, you get it nice and wet, you lay it down. At the start, you're kind of just making sure it spreads everywhere, but then you kind of get a little bit more minute and smoothing it. But you're putting all the work in that first couple hours while it's wet. And the reason why is because if you don't, it's going to dry up and you're going to have to basically re-till all of it up and start all over again, right? So you need to make sure to put in that stuff, get it nice and spread out, get it nice and pretty. And then once you get it nice and pretty, you can go ahead and rope it off, let it dry, right? And if it starts getting messed up where people are walking on it or anything, obviously you're going to have to go back in, do it all over again, and get it nice and dry, or lay fresh stuff again, right? So anyway, you have that start where first couple hours, you're smoothing everything. And then once you get everything smoothed, you're letting it dry for like a day to a day and a half. And then once you hit that, then it's at the point where it might still be drying and firming up, but it's at a point where you can go ahead and walk on it, play on it, do whatever you need to do, and not have to worry about it quite as much because now it's got that nice strong tilt, okay? And you can go into more analogies with that where it's better to lay concrete with rebar than it is to lay it without, which you could make a collagen argument there, but that's way past what I'm trying to get it to on this one, but I think y'all get the point there. Anyway, with that said, just like with that concrete, that first couple hours is where all the work is getting put in. Same thing in here, where you have that proliferation inflammatory state, and during that time is where I'm doing a lot of my work, where I'm trying to make sure that all that injury that just happened is now stretched out and functional. And if I can get it stretched out, functional, get your range of motion back, and get you to where you're moving well in that muscles and joint is back where it's supposed to be, it's still gonna be injured. But as you're laying that tissue and as that concrete's firming, it's not firm and clumpy, it's not firm and messed up, it's more smoothed out now, and it's just firming up and getting stronger, right? So if I can get you there at the beginning, and usually it takes quite a few visits at the start, but get you to the point where you're functioning again, your range of motion's back and everything's good, you're sore from the inflammation, but once that soreness goes away and the pain just falls off. And the reason why is because now the tissue's functioning and there's not going to be that symptomatology pain response because your body's moving well, right? It just takes a minute to catch up. Now it's usually that first couple weeks. Sometimes it goes quicker, sometimes it takes a little longer, just depends on the person. But yeah, once we get everything smoothed out, it's moving correctly, it starts getting that strength back, everything's good. The problem is a lot of the conditions that we deal with in here are caused by daily activities, whether it be work related, habit related, the way we sleep, the way we drive, playing with the kids, whatever it is, right? It could be due to old traumas and stuff too. But anyway, with that said, it's due to a lot of the things that we do on a continual basis. Well, just like I said with that concrete, you rope it off and it's going to dry up just fine. The thing is, we can't really rope our lives off. You're still going to go to work. You're still going to sleep funny. You're not going to just randomly change all of your lifestyle habits overnight, nor would I ask you to. So because of that, you're continually walking on that concrete. So in that first 2 weeks, as I'm trying to smooth it out, we're having to basically try to stay ahead of the fatigue that you're putting on it. And if we can do that and stay ahead of it, it keeps getting firmer and firmer. And then finally, it gets to the point where we start backing off and you can walk on it a little bit, but I can stay ahead of it as far as the smoothing out and get the footprints to go away for, I don't know, at least a day or 2 days type thing. And then it gets to the point where you can go fatigue it for like 4 or 5 days to a week, and it's not at the point where it's getting symptomatology again. I can smooth it out really easy and get that function back in there. And then it gets to that weak spot, and we just keep that for a while and make sure it keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then as you hit a point where you've been weekly for that 60-day period, and it's nice and strong, symptomatology's good, all that sort of stuff, that's when we can start backing off a lot more, because it's hit a point where that tissue is finally strengthened enough in that functional state where it can take a good amount of workload without me having to get that correction back in there, right? So pretty much what I'm doing is just trying to get it stretched back out and functioning, because if I don't, the fatigue you're putting on it's going to revert it right back to where you're going to have to relay that concrete. You got footprints all over it, you know what I mean? So I hope that kind of makes sense. But yeah, that's the big thing at the start with the acute phase, is most of the work's at the beginning, and then after that you're letting it dry for a day or so. And if you can control and get everything smooth, you just need to maintain it while it continues to dry. But of course, we're walking on it. That's the hard part and why all of this is tricky, okay? So anyway, with that said, let's talk about that second analogy, which is gonna be that regeneration remodel. This one's a little quicker and a little more simple, right? So instead of talking about concrete for that beginning, let's talk about like looking at your yard, right? So you look out there and you've got this beautiful grass, right? And we're about to get to this fun time of year where there's a ton of weeds out there, and it's because we need to get rid of them because the grass is starting to come back, right? It's out competing it. So what's the best way to get rid of weeds? You go hand pull them, right? I mean, you can use pre-annuals, you can use weed killers, you can use all sorts of stuff, but pulling them is going to be the best way if you can, okay? It's take the longest, yeah, but that's the best way to do it, all right? So say you got a ton of them, and I've done this where you spend many hours trying to get all these weeds out of your yard, right? Say you spend 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 hours trying to catch up and pull all these weeds to get ahead, right? All that means is that next time you're going to spend a little less time doing so, okay? So you might spend only 10 to 15 or 5 hours or 2 hours or something like that doing the exact same work, because it's still going to come back, okay? And then the more you do it, the more it gets to the point where you only got to put in 30 minutes, you can do the entire yard, it's no big deal, okay? And then you keep doing that, and it's like, it doesn't take any time at all. You're picking up one or two, no problem. And then the next year, it's not quite as bad because you stayed ahead of it this time, right? And it's not as bad. The second you stop doing that, you take a year or two off, you take time off, all that sort of stuff, it compounds on itself. You're going to have to put in another 20, 30 hours. And then it gets to the point where it's back to square one, where it's just bad. Well, that regeneration remodel stage we're talking about is just like that, where you just put all this time in that acute phase into getting that weed control all taken care of, right? Why would you keep fatiguing yourself in this time with not maintaining the weeds? You know what I mean? If you stay on it, that tissue continues to get stronger and stronger and stronger to where it can take that fatigue, because like I said, it's lifestyle that does this stuff. If you can maintain it, it keeps getting firmer and firmer to the point where after that 2-year mark, you've literally been functioning that whole time. Now you have very strong, firm tissue that has been good for 2 years and in a very functional state. And it hasn't been affected by all the fatigue of the daily basis nearly as bad, because you have made sure to maintain it. You've changed the oil in the car. You've made sure to rotate the tires. You've pulled the weeds. You've done everything you need to maintain it. And because of that, you're actually still going to have a very good product. You've taken care of yourself. You know what I mean? But if you don't do that and put in that general maintenance during that time, then it's going to revert right back to square one. You're going to have to do the acute phase all over again just because we didn't maintain. So I hope that makes sense. That's basically the way the healing process works, okay? At the start, you have a trauma, you're healing for a very long time, but at the beginning is where it's all episodic. If you can get it functioning and get it to stay that way for that time, it's good. But then you still got to maintain it for quite a while. Otherwise, we're just going to keep reverting back to this episodic type stuff where it's going to keep getting pissed off, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. That's going to be a lot of what we talk about later as far as the stuff goes. Y'all have a blessed day, and we'll see y'all next time, okay?